Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Talk on Things and Stuff. I just have a little bit of time, and there's some things that have been kind of going through my mind since our last episode that I wanted to capture in the moment before I get all along with my day. And if you've seen the most recent episode called Punching Up and Smacking Down, then you'll know that we take some time to go over a concept called Rappaport's Rules. And it's 4 steps that help you both humanize and provide some reciprocal charity to anyone that you may be engaged in a discussion or criticism about topics for which especially people feel very close to their heart. After that video, I went ahead and made kind of a condensed little brief informational video about Rappaport's Rules that I want to go ahead and play now. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how this can be helpful in actually, preparing you even before a discussion. So let's go ahead and bring that up now and add this to our stream. You can find the link for this on the Thinker of Thoughts YouTube channel, and here we go. All right, so that is that. Now, there's something about these 4 steps that when they're taken in the heat of the moment, in the middle of a debate, you're restating the argument that your discussing partner / opponent is making in order to convey that you understand their perspective so that you're not creating a straw man argument. And then you're going into acknowledge areas where you have agreement. So you're kind of humanizing them and letting them see that you acknowledge them as rational and moral and capable person. And then you're listing lessons learned to show that you yourself are teachable and you might be mistaken about things and you're willing to adapt to new information. And then you're responding in a way that doesn't demonize the other person, but is able to show where your difference of perspective comes from, and allows a little bit better because you're modeling a form of discussion that they hopefully will mirror. And sometimes they won't, but you can't control that. All you can do for your part is to try to show the mutual respect that's embodied in these 4 steps. Now, it's helpful in the heat of the moment, but I want to talk a little bit about how this can help you even before you get into a discussion. And by way of example, I want to use baptism. And let me just take that away from here now. Now, it's not uncommon when you leave the church, you still have a lot of friends and family who are members of the church. And, to the extent that they still want you to be a part of their lives, to find joy in the things that they find joy in, chances are you are going to be invited to a baptism of a niece or a nephew or some family member. This has happened to me several times. And it's always a challenge for those of us who have left the church, because baptism comes to mean something that we may actually see as harmful or damaging. And that is that you're taking a kid who you're telling has the age of accountability. You're having them make a commitment that they really don't know what they're committing to. You're doing it so early, and you're framing it as though that's the only righteous choice they can make in their life, and that everyone's going to be disappointed if they don't make it, but everyone's going to really celebrate it if they do make it, as though they are making a choice of their own free will, when really there's a lot of subtle coercive messaging behind all of it. And then that is going to linger over their head as some sort of covenant that they made, that they have to obey the leaders of the church for the rest of their life. And if they ever decide to step out of line or have thoughts or inclinations that are divergent from what the grand narrative of the brethren is, then they are betraying their covenants. And so it's sort of like this thing that hangs over their head the whole time. So, that's one way of looking at it. And that's frequently the way that we in the ex-Mormon community reflect on those things. And so to have a niece or nephew who you love and you want to have the freedom to learn and grow according to their own, volition, their own priorities, it's a fraught concept for you to go and witness the ceremony where all of this is brought onto the person. And so I think I don't really have to go too much into that, because most of the people that are watching this video would probably be able to relate to that experience, being able to see that as the paradigm that causes some degree of pain. Now, that being said, one of the things about this Rappaport's rules is it really forces you to step out of your own perspective, step out of your own mind, and try to inhabit the worldview of the person that you're discussing things with. And when you do this, you want to genuinely search for the good in their perspective. And what I mean by that is, even two people on different sides of an argument that has moral implications like this one, where one side might see the other side as bad, each side sees themselves as good, and they see good in their position. So when you do that thing where you're reflecting on where the person you're speaking with is coming from, you want to look for what they might see as good in it. And when you do that, try to take it seriously and ask yourself, is there actually good in it? And to the extent that there's good in it, then you can articulate that when you respond it, when you list things that you agree with, or when you list things that you may have learned from reflecting on their perspective. When I say be authentic, what I mean is look for the good and actually believe that it can be good. Many of these things come with a whole bunch of stuff bundled along with it. But not everybody accepts every aspect that's bundled. Not everybody sees the things that you see as harmful, and it's okay to let people have differences of opinion on those things. And it's going to help you relate to and connect with people, and you may be able to preserve your relationship and gain a new perspective that gives you something that you can apply in your own life. And I want to talk about baptism on this, because if you take some time to think about, we've already listed all the problems of baptism, so I'm not going to invalidate or say that there are no problems, but I want to now focus on the good, because anytime you look at anything, a person or anything like that, there's going to be good and bad, and you have to confront the good and see what in there is worth preserving. Because the thing about baptism is it's a part of every Mormon's life. It's a cultural touchstone. It's a landmark that everybody goes through, and there's a great deal of focus placed on it. And when you take away all of the different trappings that we can see coercive elements in it, then think about what it actually represents. It represents, at an early age, talking to a child about the fact that there are choices that are good and bad, that are harmful and that there's an element of responsibility and accountability that they eventually inhabit as they act as agents in the world. And when I say agents, I'm not talking about the Elder Bednar, where your only agency is in following the brethren, but in people who make choices that affect other people. And those choices are initiated by them. Because having that conversation start young, where kids understand that their actions do have consequences that may be hurtful to themselves or to other people, that's a discussion that is important in every individual's life when we live in a society. And despite all of the shortcomings, Mormonism has that conversation start at 8 years old. And it serves as this touchstone that then can be reminded and called upon when needed to invoke the idea that each of us does have personal responsibility for ourselves, for our community, for our society, and that the choices that we make do matter, and it is worthwhile reflecting on the nature and consequences of the choice that we make. And all of the moral conversation that happens around baptism has some value in a society, regardless of which moral framework that you have. Having that conversation is useful because it gets kids early on to realize that they are a member of a community, that choices that they make can affect themselves and others. And so when you look on baptism and say, wait a second, there is this really useful aspect of it, this really positive aspect of it, and realize that in addition to all of the problematic things that we're happy to talk about, there is this gem at the center of it, then it helps you kind of realize how it may play a role in the lives, in the minds, and in the heart of your family members who still hold it as a sacred experience that is important above and beyond all of the religious trappings that go along with it. Those positive aspects are still there and they still serve a function. And there's a reason that the utility and the principle of having that conversation about baptism at 8 years old does serve a positive role in the lives of the members beyond the covenant aspect of it. Now, part of the reason why it's important to think about things like this even before you enter into a debate is because then it makes it easier and it makes things flow more naturally when you do get into a potentially contentious argument with somebody who holds a different view. But it also softens your own heart, and it helps you see people who still hold a reverence for these things as human, and it helps you understand that there's still some worth from the perspective of moral character and upbringing in the positions that they hold. And when they hear that you are able to articulate, maybe in ways that they understand just kind of invisibly and maybe haven't thought specifically about it, but if you're able to articulate those things, then they'll understand that you see them as good moral people who have some depth. Now, that opens the way for you to then point out where the differences that you have give you a different perspective, and that can further your conversations with those things so that then they're primed to realize that your own perspective that may hold baptism in a different light has some worth too, because then you can talk about issues of actual accountability, what it means to give informed consent, what it means to hold a moral framework that is derived from something other than the decrees of a particular religious body, that there still is a moral framework that you can have, that you can see the world and still acknowledge that there is right and wrong. It's just you look at that through a different lens. Now, above and beyond that, when we step away from religion, there are all of these rituals that serve a role in the lives of church members that have this function, in this case of baptism, of cementing the idea that there is some accountability, that your actions do matter, and that there is right and wrong that we need to start thinking about from a young age. Because when you abandon church, if you also abandon those rituals and you abandon that process, then you have actually lost something. You've lost the good in addition to losing the bad. And so it's worth reflecting on these things because it's helpful to say, what did I actually get that was positive from these things? And is that something that is worth replicating in my own life, but without all of the trappings that I have problems with? Because a lot of these rituals and things that end up as touchstones and landmarks in the lives of people who grow up in the church, when you look at each one and say, what is the good part of it, you may find that those are good things that are independent of any particular religious vocabulary, that are still worthy of being incorporated into your own life. And so then you get the joy of trying to find some way to recreate it, to make it your own, to build family tradition and ritual that can help unite your family unit and bring some of the cohesion, some of the mutual love and respect, and the feeling that you have that you're surrounded by people who love and care about you and are wanting you to grow up to be a person of quality and character from a moral framework that has been thoughtfully considered and adopted. And so when I look at baptism, when I'm invited to the baptism of my family members, I try not to sink into only seeing the bad, but realizing that there's some good, positive things that can be found there. And to the extent that I go and am able to participate and see the good, and for my part, elevate and accentuate the good. And, I'll have my time when I can talk about the bad of it, but I don't have to vomit every single aspect of my perspective on these things when I'm trying to support and show love for my family, that even though they could choose to completely isolate me, they are inviting me to take part in the story of their family as they see it right now. And there's love behind that. And so I can accept that and find the good in it and preserve the relationship that I have with that. And in the meantime, improve my own family dynamic by holding on to those things that are good and positive and learning from the lessons of what has survived in Mormonism. Anyway, so that's it. That is the brief discussion about baptism and what we can learn from trying to apply the principles of Rappaport's rules in our own lives, to preserve the good and make sure that we're carrying with us those positive, helpful, moral and ethical aspects of the traditions that we came from in order to build our own traditions and have the unity that brings within our own families and lives. So with that being said, I got to sign off because I got things I got to do, but this has been Talk on Things and Stuff. Take care.